My husband was manipulated by his mother and demanded a paternity test for our child. I agreed, but my mother-in-law tampered with the results. I, 28F, have been with my spouse, Mark, 30M, name changed for privacy, for 6 years and married for the past 2. I'll start with some backstory. My mother-in-law has never been the nicest person to me, but I usually ignored it, especially in the start of our relationship. I was young and naive, and I imagined that mother-in-laws behaved similarly with their sons. When I was 16, I moved out of my family's house and haven't had much contact with them since. So I didn't have any perspective on what a healthy family looked like. I guess the events of the last few weeks have been building up for a while, and now I'm completely lost. I don't know what to do. For reference, when I first met my husband's parents, we were all out to dinner. His mother appeared kind enough at first, but throughout the dinner, she kept making comments that were targeted and underhanded. So, do you have a job of your own, or do you just live off Mark's money? Have you ever considered losing weight? You have such a pretty face. I think you would be stunning if you were a little slimmer. You're a great girl, but I just don't think I could ever find anyone good enough for my baby boy. I understand, I ignored every possible red flag. But, in my defense, I was deeply in love with this guy. She constantly said these things in a nice, humorous tone, and I didn't want to overreact. For the first several years of our relationship, she frequently made small, underhanded comments about my weight, appearance, or the idea that I was dating Mark for his money. The trouble is, we both work in the same field and earn nearly the same amount. While he earns slightly more than I do, it is far from enough to justify gold digging. At first, the things she said bothered me, so I took them up with Mark. He repeatedly told her to quit making comments like that. But, because it was never anything excessive, he dismissed them, stating that because he is her only kid, Mom is a little clingy. We also didn't see his parents very much because we were both busy at work and lived about an hour away. When he proposed to me, things quickly escalated. I won't go into too much detail, but my mother-in-law made our engagement and wedding difficult. When we invited his parents to supper to announce our engagement, his mother broke down when she saw the diamond. She asked Mark how much it cost and flushed bright red when he told her. I understand that it may appear to be a lot to others, but we both work in a lucrative industry and are financially blessed. The price was reasonable for him. Still, she informed him that I didn't deserve such a costly ring and that he had never purchased her anything that expensive, something she thought she deserved as his mother. She also stated that she did not believe he was serious about me after we had been dating for 3 years. Mark urged her not to be crazy and left it at that, but supper was destroyed, and everyone left shortly thereafter. His mother did not speak to him for 3 weeks after that. Later, she sent him an apology, stating she was afraid of losing her little man. During the wedding planning, my mother-in-law attempted to tamper with the guest list and vendors. And yes, she wore a white dress to my wedding. Mark supported me throughout this. We had passwords for all of the vendors, and he had his mom change them. Our first year of marriage was wonderful. We wanted to have a family and started trying for a baby right away. However, everything changed when I became pregnant at the end of last year. We surprised my in-laws at their house with a small gift basket including champagne, chocolate, and a tiny plaque that read Grandma. When they opened it and realized what was going on, my mother-in-law looked at me and said, "You sure it's my baby? Mark's, right?" I was astonished, but she smiled and behaved as if it were a joke, and the evening went on. That's when she started making a lot of comments about my weight. "You've really put on a few pounds, haven't you? Be careful, or your husband's eyes might start to wander." I stayed thin during my whole pregnancy with Mark. "You should really stop being so lazy and put effort into looking good for my baby, Mark." She also mentioned women she knew who had misidentified another man's child as their husband's. It always felt like she was after me. She even joked about how she wished I wouldn't do something like that, implying that I cheated. I despised these statements and constantly requested her not to make them. She would dismiss it, adding, "You take things too seriously, can't you take a joke?" Then she brought up Lauren, 30F, Mark's ex from high school. She would talk about Lauren's skinny and petite figure and how she matched Mark better because they were both athletic. These comments, along with pregnancy hormones, caused me to cry several times. At first, Mark would yell at his mother to stop talking to me in that manner, which only irritated her more. But about the 4th or 5th month, he became distant. He started visiting his mother more frequently without me and would come over on weekends, even when I begged him to remain because I was sick or in agony. Around my 5th month, he stopped kissing me goodbye in the mornings before work, hugging or caressing me at home, and expressing no emotion at all. I was completely confused. But whenever I asked him what was wrong, he became irritated and told me I was acting clingy and annoying, or that he was just tired. He even indicated that I was acting crazy due to my pregnancy hormones. I let it go and tried to concentrate on myself and my kid, but I was sure my mother-in-law was bugging him about it. When my baby was born 1 month ago, my mother-in-law insisted on being present in the delivery room. I didn't want her there. But Mark claimed if I didn't allow her to come, he wouldn't be there for me either. At this point, I was so emotionally and physically weary that I caved in and let her stay. Although my labor was long and complicated, holding my kid was the sweetest moment of my life. I'd do it all again for him. Then, just after they cleaned him up and returned him to me, Mark went to me and said, "I want a paternity test." I was shocked. I assumed it was a prank at first. But he was serious. I was really perplexed and kept asking why. I'd never cheated on anyone or given him cause to believe I had. My job was remote, and he had to go into the office, so I was practically constantly at home. My pregnancy was very challenging, therefore I didn't have the opportunity or time to have an affair. He kept stressing that he wanted to be sure the baby was his and that he didn't want to pay for some other man's child. Hearing him say such things about our baby broke my heart. I consented to take the paternity test because I had nothing to conceal. 3 weeks ago, we received the results. As you might expect based on the headline, the results were negative. I thought there had to be a mistake, but Mark refused to even look at me. He packed his belongings and left for his mother's place, leaving me home alone with a 2-week-old newborn. I called repeatedly, but he didn't answer. I texted him, saying there had to be a mistake and suggesting another test, but he did not respond. He eventually called me 1 week ago. By this point, I was a wreck and all I needed was help with my baby. Instead of offering any comfort, he remarked, "My mother was correct. I can't believe I married a woman like you." That's when everything clicked. What did he mean when he said his mom was right? At that point, I was certain she had told him lies about me having an affair, being immoral, or something equally ridiculous. I decided to phone my mother-in-law yesterday because Mark no longer responded to my messages. When she answered, I told her I needed to speak with Mark and that he couldn't just abandon me with a 1-week-old kid after all of the issues I experienced throughout pregnancy and labor. She smiled and told me he wasn't home, and that I earned what I received. That was it. I was finished. I was done with the entire family by this time. I had my baby to think about, and I was not going to let them walk all over him like they had done to me. I was not going to put up with my mother-in-law's nonsense longer. I replied, "I don't know what you think of me, but I never cheated." The test was wrong. That was the turning point. She laughed again and informed me that she already knew. Then she acknowledged that she had submitted the incorrect sample to ensure that the results were negative, because, in her words, I did not deserve her kid, Mark. She refused to let me baby trap him. She went even further. He will never believe you or put some woman over his own mother, so just let it go. I was stunned. For a minute, I was unable to answer. Then she went on a big rant about how she always wanted Mark to be with someone good enough for him, someone who matched him in appearance. She mentioned Lauren again, stating how much she missed her and how Mark should recognize that she was the one he was meant to be with. The paternity test was simply a ploy to encourage him to leave me so she could find him a suitable companion. I hung up. Since then, I've been numb. I can't believe a real grown-up would act like this. That gets me to where I am now. I texted Mark right after and told him what she had said. I advised him to ask her himself. I'm not sure where to proceed from here. Should I have another paternity test? I'm thinking of hiring a lawyer, but I don't want to make things any more complicated. Should I even take him back if he decides he wants to return? Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Update. One quick update for everyone who asked. First and foremost, thank you to everyone who responded and offered suggestions. I honestly didn't anticipate so many people to see this. I went to bed last night after finishing this post and awoke to 900 comments. I read them all, but I won't be able to respond to everyone, so I'll answer a few questions here. As I mentioned in my essay, I am not connected to my family and have not spoken to my parents in years. They did not attend my wedding, and I do not believe they are aware of or concerned about my baby. My family is from Minnesota, but I came to the East Coast after leaving my parents' house. I supported myself through school and college by working various jobs, met Mark in college, and have been working remotely since. I don't have many friends locally, and my family is out of the question. I'll call my coworker Katie, F., who lives close and we occasionally text. I informed Katie a little about what was going on, and she was kind enough to offer to come over and support me. When she arrived at my place, I was a wreck. I hadn't showered in a week, the house was a mess, and my 2-week-old newborn was wailing in my arms. I burst into tears because I was so relieved to see her. Which was awkward because we weren't even close. But she was incredible. She inquired what was going on, and I couldn't even explain. So I just showed her the original post. Katie has been a sweetheart. She's been minding my son while I clean up, eat some proper food, and take my first hot shower in 2 weeks. She's also been a rock for me right now and is outraged on my behalf. To be honest, it feels great to finally have someone on my side. That's it for now. Several of you inquired about my father-in-law. I never mentioned him because he isn't very talkative. I'm not sure what he thinks of me, but he's always been kind to me and normally overlooks my mother-in-law. I'm also not sure why my mother-in-law dislikes me so much, but it's not because of ethnicity or religion, as some of you have stated. We are all white and not religious. I believe it's because I'm a bit of a big girl and rather tall, but Mark is really fit and enjoys working out at the gym. I'm not big or unhealthy, I exercise regularly, but I'm not as small as my mother-in-law or some of Mark's ex-partners. That is my best guess. Honestly. I'm also planning to contact a lawyer today. At this point, I don't think I'll ever look at Mark in the same way again. I know I want a divorce. I had already screenshotted as many chats as possible, both with my mother-in-law and with Mark, just in case this happened. I'll also acquire another paternity test and give him the results as I serve him with divorce papers. He hasn't responded to my texts yet, and at this point, I do not care. I don't want my son to have a father like him. I'm outraged that he didn't even talk to me before departing me and his son. I don't even want him around anymore. Update number 2. Hello everyone, it's been a pretty hectic couple of months, and I've had numerous comments and private messages requesting an update. So I figured I'd catch everyone up. It's been 2 months since my previous post. Mark returned home about 2 days after I posted my first update. By that point, I had cleaned myself and the house, thanks to Katie, and had contacted with a lawyer about divorce proceedings. Mark arrived early in the morning, looking utterly dreadful. Unshaven. His eyes appeared as if he'd been crying for 3 days. I was not expecting him. We stood there in quiet for a bit before he sobbed and apologized. I know I claimed I didn't want anything to do with him anymore, but seeing him stand in front of me was difficult. I'd loved this man for 6 years, and it was difficult to let go of everything. Hearing him apologize felt wonderful too. I allowed him in, and we sat in the living room while I held my baby. He kept crying. Eventually, he begged to hold his son. The wrath from the previous few days returned, and I said no. He simply nodded and let it go. After gathering his thoughts, he asked if we could talk. I consented because I wanted to know what he had to say. Thank you to a commenter here, I remembered to record the chat on my phone. The truth comes out. He didn't want to believe it when I texted him what his mother had told me, but it continued bothering him. Finally, he chose to confront her. Of course, she denied it, telling him that I was attempting to baby trap him for money and isolate him from his family. However, my father-in-law had had enough of his insane wife at that point, and he told Mark everything. It appears that one of my mother-in-law's nephews worked at the lab where the paternity test was sent. She persuaded him to switch the results. Mark stated that it felt as if his entire universe had fallen in that moment. Because he recognized what a lousy husband and father he had been up to this point. What a manipulative bitch his mother was. To be honest, hearing that made me feel amazing, but it was not the end. The scope of her manipulation. His mother then attempted to defend herself by claiming that I was too large and womanly for her ideal, handsome son. She wanted him to divorce me and reunite with his ex since, in her opinion, she was prettier and more suitable for him. She also despised the fact that he was paying me and our baby too much attention, because it was taking precious time away from her. Things become worse. When he came over to her place during my 4th month, one of the occasions I was unable to go, she invited his ex, Lauren. She convinced Mark that I had been aloof and irritated because I was having an affair and forcing him to raise another man's child. Lauren, who was petite and, admittedly, very attractive, flirted with him at every opportunity. And Mark acknowledged falling for his mother's deception. He began seeing Lauren behind my back. Because he enjoyed feeling wanted, as I struggled with my pregnancy, he was the one having the affair. He stated they never slept together, only dated and kissed and such. As if that makes things better. He claimed he called it off the week before I went into labor due to remorse. Then, after telling me everything, he pleaded for forgiveness. He stated that he will go to any length to resolve the situation. That if it came to it, he would remove his mother from our life for good. And for a brief while, it seemed tempting. I almost gave in. Then I glanced at my son. And I remembered everything he had put me through over the past year. How he never established boundaries with his mother. How he engaged in an affair. How he abandoned me when I was most vulnerable. I informed him that with everything that had happened during my pregnancy and after our son was born, it simply wasn't feasible. I no longer saw him the same way, and I had lost trust in him. He cried some more before agreeing to arrange a motel nearby. I also informed him I wanted to take a true paternity test again. He protested, but I insisted. So the test was scheduled for the very next day, the results and divorce. 2 weeks later, the results were returned. Wouldn't you know it? He's the father? Cue more crying from him. Is it awful that I felt vindicated? Last week, the divorce papers were finally drafted, and I served him. After 2 months of agony, he was a wreck and attempted to recommend couples counseling before making any major decisions. But I was really done with him. I requested a 50-50 asset distribution and primary custody, which my lawyer believes will be readily granted given the facts I have of Mark's behavior toward our baby. Mark will get supervised visits on weekends, and his mother will not be permitted around my child. Mark stated that he will not challenge me on the terms, out of guilt. And honestly, rightly so. Father-in-law steps in. My father-in-law contacted me the day Mark was served to apologize for not stepping in sooner. I forgive him. From what I've heard, he's always been a laid-back man, and Mark has also stated that he is likely to leave his wife. What about my mother-in-law? I don't know anything about her anymore. She's been blocked since the day Mark arrived at my door. Moving forward, I'll be moving out of our flat. While I am heartbroken and overwhelmed by how my marriage ended, I am also hopeful for the future. So that's what's been going on recently. I probably won't update for a bit. It's time to focus on myself and my son. I'd simply like to thank everyone who offered advice and support. I'm quite appreciative. I probably wouldn't have gotten this far without it. Update 3. Wow, I had forgotten about this account. It's been a year since my previous post. I deleted Reddit off my phone and sort of forgot about it. This will be a brief update for those who wish to know. Current situation. My divorce is set to be finalized next month. Mark abruptly decided that he no longer wanted to give me majority custody or supervised visits, so the proceedings took a while. But my attorney was a beast. With the tapes I have of his admission regarding his behavior throughout and after my pregnancy, I have a good chance of getting what I want. My baby is now 14 months old and the loveliest little boy. We moved across the state to a charming little apartment. Thanks to my job, I can spend most of my time with him. I've also begun going out more and joined a book club, so I've definitely met some new people here. The divorce, relocation, and attempting to raise my son on my own have all been difficult. But, really? I feel so much better without Mark and his witch of a mother ruining my life. I should have recognized the warning signs from the start, when this man repeatedly prioritized his mother before his own pregnant wife. But you live and learn. And I will not make that mistake again. What's next? I'm not sure if I'm ready for a relationship again. But, for the time being, all I want to do is be as present as possible with my son. I don't think I'll be updating again, but I'd like to add that I'm in a much better place than I was last year. And I thank everyone who has wished me well. Crazy mother-in-law and father-in-law arrested after attempting to trespass on our land and being attacked by bees on the neighbor's property. I reside in a very rural place on a tiny ranch that has been in my family since my grandfather's day. We are around 15 minutes from the nearest little town. When I say small, I actually mean small. My wife and I met by happenstance around 6 years ago when I stopped in town to pick up some groceries. She gave off a tomboy feeling and had recently arrived in the region. She had recently finished school and discovered that she despised city life and wished to return to something more familiar. I will get to that later. I believe she noticed me come in with my pickup and some big equipment and came over to ask what kind of animals I had. She soon came to the point. She was looking for work. She had previous experience with cattle and was new to the region. It's unusual in our area to see single women looking for ranch hand employment, but she claimed she could prove herself, and if I wasn't impressed, I could drive her back to town and drop her off at the bus stop. I was seeking an extra hand for the next few months and had considered asking my neighbor's lads, but I decided to give her a chance. I'm pleased I did since she had a strong work ethic and was proactive about everything on the ranch. I let her remain in a guest room in the main home for the first week until she saved enough money for an apartment. Within 6 months she moved back in and we began dating. 8 months later, we married in a quiet ceremony attended by approximately 20 friends and family members. Her uncle was the only family member that turned up. Her uncle was a tank of a man, even in his old age, and he had a sheep farm in Northern California. During the ceremony, we talked a little about business, and he was pleased to give my wife away. I could tell how the father influenced her work ethic and livestock knowledge. However, there was one topic that my wife disliked discussing: her biological parents. At first, she only mentioned there was bad blood between them, which was great because we didn't know each other well yet. However, once we were engaged, I wanted to learn more about her family and what I was getting into. Her mother, the professor, worked at a college teaching a subject I would most likely never study. My wife portrayed her father, Phil, as a weak man who would do whatever the professor desired. Some of the details she told me about her mother's actions seemed ludicrous and borderline psychotic. For example, in middle school, the professor tried to obtain my wife a girlfriend by claiming she was a lesbian. Now, while my wife is a tomboy, she is not a lesbian. There was also a time when the professor desired to live a natural lifestyle, and begged Phil's brother to allow them to reside on his property. Within a week, the professor despised it and summoned them both back to the city. My wife, on the other hand, adored the farm and felt a connection to both it and her uncle. She left home at 16 and stayed with her uncle until she was 18. The professor repeatedly threatened to drag her back home, but never followed through. After turning 18, my wife went to school, received a 4-year degree, and tried an office job but found it unsatisfactory. She began traveling the bus to rural locations in search of suitable work, and this is how we met. Last year, around March, we began receiving mail addressed to the professor and Phil, including bills, bank statements, and the like. I thought this was unusual, but my wife wanted to throw it all away. I began labeling the letters "Return to Sender" and "No Such Occupant," and returned them to the mailbox. This situation worsened in October. I was tidying up the yard when a brilliant white SUV arrived with a U-Haul trailer attached. My wife looked up and turned pale. "Oh God, it's them," she exclaimed. A plump woman and a slender man, who only distantly resembled her uncle, emerged. The professor instantly approached my wife. "Professor. Well, let me take a look at you. It has been years." The wife: "Mom, what are you doing here?" "Your instructor. The university is doing virtual classes, and with COVID, we figured we could self-isolate at our ranch." She placed an unusual emphasis on the word "our." "You. Excuse me, but this isn't your ranch." "Professor. I'm confident we can resolve the ownership issue. Aren't you going to invite us in?" "Me? Ma'am, you might be my wife's mother, but you're a stranger to me. I would rather not." The professor turned to Phil. "Professor. Make the call." Phil immediately called the cops and began constructing a story about us refusing to let them into the house that they co-owned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was insanely twisted. Fortunately, as I indicated earlier, it is a small town. The sheriff approached, and it was someone I had known for most of my life. The sheriff exemplifies the ethos of a small-town constable. He strives to be a peacemaker and peacekeeper first and foremost. He was also aware that the land had been in my family for 3 generations. "Sheriff, please explain. What's this I hear about you selling half your ranch, Duke?" "Me? I did not. These are my wife's parents, and they believe they have a legal claim to my land." "Professor. Not think? We have lived here since February. With tenant laws that means—" "Sheriff, you know. Funny, I don't remember you in town." That quieted the professor for a moment, but then she delved into her purse and drew out a stack of mail, mostly bills and bank statements with our ranch's address on them. "Professor. Then how do you explain these?" The sheriff took the letters and examined them. "Sheriff, you're welcome. Ma'am, these are all marked "Return to Sender." The professor became desperate. "Professor. Please, I have not seen my daughter in years. I just want to make sure she is okay. Surely, you can see that he," she pointed at me, "controls her every move." The sheriff rolled his eyes and approached to speak with my wife and me again. He enjoys resolving interpersonal conflicts, but he had never experienced such craziness. "Sheriff. You might want to invite them in for coffee and chat for a few minutes. They're your parents." "My spouse? If you leave them here, you'll just have to come back in 5 minutes to handle an assault." "Sheriff. You can't mean that. They are your family." "Look, I'm just heading up the road. Invite them in and talk to them." Wife's eyes flashed with rage. Your wife asked, "Does this mean you're going to invite your cousin Aaron to Thanksgiving?" Aaron, the sheriff's cousin, was now serving an 8-year sentence for a variety of felonies. The sheriff's entire family regarded him a source of disgrace. The sheriff's expression changed after he made that statement. He gave my wife a look like, "That bad, huh?" And she simply nodded. The sheriff turned back to face the professor and Phil. "Sheriff. Okay, they don't want you here. It's best if you don't come back." The two protested briefly before piling back into the SUV and driving away, with the sheriff following behind to verify they were completely off the property. This was my first meeting with the professor and Phil, and it left a lasting impression. Previously, I described how my wife's mother, the professor, made an unusual attempt to grab control of our property back in October. Things became crazier in December. Keep in mind that we reside in a little village approximately an hour from a major city, so we're not completely isolated. Our ranch is approximately 15 minutes from town via farm road. To give you the lay of the land, I stopped in town to grab some supplies, and by the time I finished packing up the truck, the professor tapped me on the shoulder. This time, she truly acted friendly. I decided to be curt. She literally begged me to listen to her for 5 minutes at the neighborhood cafe. I didn't want to set up a scene on Main Street, so I agreed. We sat down, and the lecturer began speaking. She claimed that my wife was always unsure of who she was, and that the professor and Phil only had her best interests in mind. I didn't want to rant or make charges. I was just waiting for the talk to end. Then she explained, "Your wife saw you coming and wedged herself into my life." I pushed back. I stated that I felt blessed to have her in my life. "Professor, what do you mean blessed?" "Me? Pardon?" "Professor, you just said blessed." I put my head in my hands and wished it was over. Everyone in the cafe stared at the two of us. With her final sentence, the lecturer projected her voice. My response was, "Ma'am, if you're trying to win me over, I suggest you stop using vinegar." She huffed at the phrase but then became friendly again. She reached into her purse and took out a flash drive, laying it on the table between us. "Professor. Okay, that's all the proof you need. Take a peek, and I guarantee you'll discover the truth." I was dying within, not just from shame, but also from the manner my mother-in-law behaved in front of individuals with whom I do business on a regular basis. They would certainly want to know what had transpired. Like I stated, it's a little town. I took the flash drive and fled. I returned to the property, where my wife was waiting. She could tell something had happened in town by the pissed-off expression on my face. I recounted what had happened while holding up the flash drive. My wife was baffled by it. I wasn't about to plug it into a computer we use on a regular basis, so I hunted through a closet for an old Dell laptop that hadn't been turned on in ages. We charged it, turned it on, and blocked the Wi-Fi, my wife's suggestion. We plugged the flash drive in and discovered heaps of PDFs. I'm still not sure how to convey what was within. It looked like a journal, a college article, or a thesis research, with my wife as the topic. I'm not sure what the aim was, or what the professor was testing on her own flesh and blood. It described her first experiences with toy dump trucks as a child, as well as dressed in overalls during their brief stay with her uncle, all of which were chilly, disconnected and, as my wife described it, clinical. My wife was referred to as the subject throughout. It was odd and I'm still unsure what the point was. My wife was outraged by the PDFs and urged us to burn the drive, which we did in the fire pit. That was the last time we heard from the professor, but my wife believes more will come. First and foremost, I want to mention that my wife is doing well. She's amused rather than terrified or furious, yet I can tell when she feels the need to be protected. We placed a new camera directed straight at the gate, which I'm keeping locked. I noted in the comments that we had a FaceTime contact with my wife's uncle last night to see if we could gain any additional information. Her uncle initially provided brief responses, such as, "Yeah, sounds like her," and "sounds about right." He is a don't speak ill of others type of chap. When I told him about the strange play for the ranch, he eventually revealed additional facts. Whoever predicted she'd do this before with his sheep farm gets a gold star. He stated that the professor was a major reason why he and Phil no longer speak. My wife's uncle's sheep farm was part of a much larger property owned by her grandfather. The grandfather had 3 children, 2 sons and 1 daughter. The daughter relocated to the East Coast and worked in a high-paying executive position. She is nearing retirement and was the oldest of the siblings. When the grandfather passed away, he divided his property into 3 portions. His daughter gave her half to the uncle for nearly nothing because she did not desire rural property and understood her uncle wanted to keep the farm running. The other son, Phil, retained ownership but granted uncle permission to use it. That was until Phil decided to attend an expensive university and sold his portion of the land to uncle for a good price. Uncle was able to maintain all of grandfather's land intact. Phil dated the professor during his undergraduate years and eventually married her. Uncle only heard bits and pieces because Phil only called around Thanksgiving and birthdays. That was it for many years. A few years later, the professor was in what Uncle described as a hipster phase when he learned about the farm. She didn't just show up, Phil asked first. Phil understood rural life, but the professor did not. Uncle portrayed the professor's ideal farm life as waking up to a kale smoothie, digging beets for lunch, and spending the rest of the day in the sun. If you live on a farm or ranch, you know there are plenty of everyday duties. Uncle's farm was largely a sheep farm, but they also had a vegetable garden and a small orchard, which provided enough of work. Uncle went easy on the professor, assigning her only a few tasks such as pruning dead vines in the garden and airing the compost. She took it as an agony. She nearly devastated Uncle's tomato crop that year, forcing him to redo the compost every evening. But the way she grumbled, you'd think she was looking after the entire orchard and all the sheep. She disliked manual labor but was strangely drawn to the concept of a farm. In my experience, joy cannot exist without pain. My wife, on the other hand, took to it right away. She enjoyed checking fences, maintaining the flock, distributing feed and working in the vegetable garden. Uncle mentioned that they had a local butcher who came by on occasion to take a couple lambs, depending on price and demand. The butcher paid the professor a visit once when he was on the farm. The butcher was a black man, which Uncle didn't bother or care about, but the professor made a big deal of welcoming him by shaking his hand and spoke in a sing-song, high-pitched tone. Uncle thought this was weird, so he mentioned it to us. The professor desired the farm but did not want to work it. She wanted to own it on paper and have Uncle and her husband manage it. She even persuaded her husband to fight the sale he had made with Uncle a few years before, in order to gain partial ownership. Of course, this went nowhere. Uncle had to pay a lawyer, but the case never reached court. After that, Uncle and the rest of the family refused to speak with Phil. I was curious, so I asked Uncle why the professor yelled at me when I stated I was blessed to have my wife. He chuckled and added, "Really kicked that hornet's nest, huh?" Then he mentioned that the first night the professor stayed with Uncle, he and his wife cooked dinner. When they sat at the table, Uncle was about to say grace. My wife flushed when he mentioned this. Apparently, this is a humiliating memory for her. The lecturer exclaimed, "This family doesn't say grace." Uncle shrugged. He wanted to be flexible and told her she didn't have to participate if she didn't want to. She tried to push things even farther, demanding that as long as she was in that house, no one would say grace. Uncle stated that this was the first time he had been disrespectful to the professor, and that no guest would tell him what he could and could not do in his own home. I'm not sure why the lecturer believed that individuals in rural areas did not attend church. After hearing about the sheep farm, I will contact a lawyer. We'll see how it goes. I believe I mentioned it in a previous piece, but we live in a tiny town, and my wacky mother-in-law, the professor, has already caused a stir in only 2 appearances, one at our house and another in town. What I appreciate about small communities is that everyone feels like family and looks out for one another. What I detest about small communities is how quickly gossip spread. The sheriff from my initial post is completely on our side. Dan has done his best to explain to everybody who asks that it is not their business. The difficulty is between my wife and me. We attempted to be social in town before COVID. We attended church regularly and took part in potlucks. I hired my neighbor's boys to help out on the ranch numerous times over the summer. We enjoy being social. When the professor created a disturbance at the cafe in December, I could feel the town's attention on me. Nobody knows what happened, but they want to. I can feel it. They are too polite to ask, yet not enough to avoid whispering. It's getting to us. The sheriff informed me that last week, the local pastor directly asked him what was going on with my wife and her mother. The sheriff stated that the pastor believed there should be an easy answer. Sheriff caught it in the bud. My wife's statements had a greater impact than we anticipated. The sheriff stated that unless we requested assistance, it was neither his nor the pastor's responsibility. He did remark to the pastor, and I recall how the sheriff put it to me, "They're part of your flock. She," referring to the professor, "is the wolf. Become an excellent shepherd." Despite this, I continue to receive strange looks whenever I am in town. Scenes like the one in December are unusual around here. Any advice? So it eventually occurred. The professor and Phil are in jail. The circumstances are also unusual, but we are relieved that a resolution has been reached. 2 nights ago, the sheriff called us in the middle of the day. My wife picked up, and after a few minutes of conversation, she began chuckling. She told me what the sheriff said. It appears the professor and Phil decided to try to sneak onto our property. Why? I can't predict this woman. The professor decided that instead of attempting to enter the ranch via the farm road, which we can see from our house, she and Phil would park a bit further away and enter our land via a neighbor's property. My neighbor to the east owns a small orchard and is a hobby beekeeper. He doesn't receive much honey each year, but what he does get he shares or sells at the farmer's market. The bees had just begun to pollinate the field chickweed here. The professor evidently stumbled upon his bee boxes, actually bumping into one. The bees start swarming her, and either she or Phil become enraged and kick one of the boxes over. My neighbor has a sensor perimeter around his bee boxes in case of bears, and it went off. He dashed to his bee boxes and saw two middle-aged people batting at bees and yelling. My neighbor phoned the authorities, and after about 20 minutes of attempting to burn and hose the bees down, he swiftly filed charges for the destruction of his bee box and trespassing. Apparently, there are additional charges for interrupting and ruining a farm's agricultural capabilities since his bees pollinate his orchard. They left. Both were apparently coated in stings and are currently in county jail. The sheriff stated that the professor is attempting to argue that the area where the bee boxes are located is a public easement and that she has legal access to it. For the time being, however, it is over. Everyone here breathes a great sigh of relief. After my wife's betrayal with my business partner, I guard my daughter's future while they try to reinsert themselves in our lives. My ex-wife Kathy, 38, and I, 38, had been together for 19 years and married for 16. We also had a 14-year-old daughter together, however she left approximately 6 months ago to be with my previous work partner. To be more specific, my ex-work partner, as he sold his shares and left the company once I uncovered the affair. Leon, the guy I used to run the firm with, was a co-worker and a close friend. We agreed to quit our jobs and form a company together. We'd been working together for 5 years, and he'd had an affair with my wife for 3 of them. I learned about it approximately 6 months ago when I discovered some text messages on my wife's phone. When I challenged her about it, she didn't even try to dispute it and instead accepted everything. She told me she was sick and tired of hiding things and simply wanted to leave. I was saddened since I had no notion she was unhappy in our marriage, and I was willing to do anything to change that. So on the day I confronted her, when she announced she was leaving, I assured her we could still make it work. That was very stupid of me, but I was desperate. She simply became irritated with me and stated that the only reason she married me in the first place was because she was pregnant and didn't want to be alone. She'd tried to love me for 16 years, but it hadn't worked. She was not going to let me stop her now that she had found someone she truly loved. She explained that now that I knew about the affair, her secret had been revealed, and I had to swallow it and move on. I was heartbroken, especially for the sake of our daughter, but she didn't even hesitate to leave. She filed for divorce, and the petition was quite simple. She simply wanted to leave and did not demand a settlement or alimony from me. The asset distribution was fairly balanced. We concluded the divorce after a few months. After a while, I knew that what had transpired would prevent me from making it work with her. After we filed for divorce, I faced Leon, who just apologized, claiming he had wanted to tell me about the affair for a long time but didn't know how. Within a few weeks, he quit and informed me that he and Kathy would be moving away to avoid causing further trouble for me. Kathy had been offered a fantastic job in Boston, and his cousin lived there, so he could work alongside him instead. He sent all of this in an email, and we never spoke again. The last time I saw Kathy was 2 months ago, on the day our divorce was finalized. Since then, I have not heard from one of them. My kid and I were going through a difficult time, but we were getting by. At least I still had my business to manage, which kept me busy since I wanted to provide my daughter the future she deserved. However, Kathy returned about a week ago and I'm still not sure if my daughter and I did the right thing. So around a week ago, at 11 p.m., someone began furiously ringing our doorbell and knocking. My daughter had already gone to bed and I was finishing up some work in my office when it happened. We hurried to the door to check and through the glass, we saw Kathy. My daughter urged me not to open the door because she was furious with her mother. Despite having partial custody, Kathy has made little effort to communicate with our daughter and the fact that she cheated does not sit well with her either. Their relationship is tight right now, but I knew if Kathy was at my house at such a late hour, it had to be urgent so I opened the door and allowed her in. Instead of coming in, she started ranting at me from the doorstep, threatening to sue me. She insisted on taking this to court so she could receive everything she was owed since she couldn't believe I had chosen to punish her so harshly. For the first few seconds, I had no understanding what she was saying, and I had to urge her to slow down and elucidate since I was so perplexed. She was still upset and said there was no need for me to pretend I didn't know because she was certain I had withheld Leon's true character from her to punish her for cheating. Then she pulled up her shirt sleeve and showed me a place on her arm covered in a band-aid. I concluded Leon must have done something, which surprised me because we had worked together for several years and he had never lost his cool in front of me. Kathy told me that they had been arguing for the past few weeks, ever since they moved to Boston. Nothing had remained the same since their move. She assumed it was because Leon was still adjusting to his new life, but after a month there, he was acting as if everything was Kathy's fault. He apparently kept accusing her of wrecking his life because he had to abandon the business he had fought so hard to build. Now he had to work with his cousin, who was always undermining him, and he blamed Kathy for everything. She was the one who told me about the affair before he was ready, and now he had to relocate to Boston for her work, so he couldn't compete for the business either. They'd been arguing every night, and the night before she arrived, he got incredibly angry and threw a vase at her. She attempted to dodge it, but it still struck her arm, causing a cut. Until that point, he had only verbally abused her, but this time it had gone too far, and she had left the house that night to take the next flight here to tell me about it. She told me that Leon had not even tried to contact her or apologize after she departed. She said I was to blame for this because she believed I was aware of his violent behavior and had concealed it from her in order to punish her. She thought it was unfair of me to do so, especially because she believed she had done me a favor by not fighting for anything during the divorce. I couldn't even get her back and secure her safety. It was all pretty foolish because, as I already stated, I had worked with Leon for a long time and knew him well, but just on a professional level. In the office, he was much different. I had never dated him and had only met the ladies he had previously dated, so there was no way I could have known about this side of him. Her charges that I had hidden everything on purpose made no sense to me, and I was furious that she was acting as if I owed her something. I attempted to explain to her that I had no idea about all of this and that I was deeply sorry that it was happening to her, but it was ultimately her fault. She could threaten me with litigation all she wanted, but she understood it wasn't my fault. She continued to argue, stating that I knew everything and that she would fight for everything she didn't get during our divorce. My daughter had been waiting at the door the entire time, and I had almost completely forgotten about her since I was so preoccupied with the fight. When we started talking in circles, she interrupted Kathy and told her to go. I was astonished since I didn't expect her to interrupt, and I believe Kathy was caught off guard. Kathy then advised my daughter to stop up and keep out of it because she was too little to understand what was happening. She told my daughter to go to bed, but she refused. She held firm and stated that Kathy had no right to speak to me in this manner, especially given what she had put me through. My daughter reminded Kathy that I had been sad for the past few months, ever since I discovered her infidelity. Kathy, the cruel and heartless monster that she was, simply carried on with her life. She then pointed out that Kathy had neglected to visit her own daughter or stay in touch since she was preoccupied with Leon and her new life. My daughter informed Kathy that she had failed to be a good wife and mother, thus she had no business acting like a victim in a scenario she had made for herself. My daughter is only 14, but seeing her express those things made me realize how much she had matured since the divorce. Kathy was completely speechless and unable to respond to our daughter's statements. Finally, my daughter informed Kathy that now that she had gone and was living with Leon, she would have to cope with whatever she was going through on her own because we were no longer her family. Kathy had dug her own grave, and now she had to lie in it. Which was exactly what she deserved for screwing people over. After saying this, my daughter slammed the door in Kathy's face and returned to her room. I could hear Kathy crying outside the door, but I didn't bother checking on her because I didn't think it was necessary given our recent chat. I too went back to bed, trying not to think about the issue for the following few days while keeping myself busy at work. I was quite proud of my daughter for standing up for me and not allowing me to appear weak in front of Kathy. Things were going well after that visit, but 3 days ago Kathy showed up again, this time with a lawyer, demanding complete custody of our kid. Fortunately, our daughter was out with a couple of friends when she came over in the evening, so I haven't told her anything about it yet. I was furious when Kathy informed me that after our daughter spoke with her the last time we met, she decided she would no longer allow our daughter to live with me. She informed me that the actual reason she hadn't tried to contact our daughter after I found out about the affair was that she didn't want to become involved in a lengthy custody battle that would disturb my life much more than she already had. This, she claimed, was why she wanted to depart discreetly and hadn't attempted to contact our daughter. She thought it would have made matters worse because I was furious about the situation. So she was basically trying to tell me that she did all of this for my sake, not just to get out of having any responsibilities. I was clearly not buying it, and I informed her that the only reason she didn't fight for anything during the divorce, let alone custody of our kid, was that she wanted to leave swiftly and start a new life with Leon. This had nothing to do with me, as she tried to make it seem, therefore I didn't need to feel sorry for her. However, she stated that she no longer cared about that since she now desired full custody of our daughter and was determined to ensure that she received it. She insisted that she would not let me ruin my daughter's opinion of her by telling her ridiculous stories and training her to disrespect her mother. Kathy said that during our last meeting, our daughter was extremely disrespectful to her, and that I encouraged this conduct. She now knew what to do and had returned to inform me that she was taking this to court. I told her to be my guest and closed the door because I didn't want to waste any more time talking to her. However, I began to question whether she had a point. I wanted to believe I was doing the right thing, but I wasn't sure, to be honest, so I felt bad about not reprimanding my daughter when she was rude to her mother. Update 1. I've determined that I have nothing to be sorry for. My daughter did the correct thing in sticking up for me, and the comments made me understand how silly I was. She cheated on me, so I don't think I should feel sorrow or regret for what happened to her. Many people in the comments urged me to speak with my daughter first, since it would be unfair for her to be caught off guard if Kathy applies for full custody after our last meeting. So I told my kid about it yesterday. I didn't want to withhold anything from her. She has already demonstrated to me that she is grown enough to handle these situations, and I feel horrible that she had to mature overnight. At least now, I can help her prepare for the future. So yet, we haven't heard from Kathy, but we expect to shortly. Our daughter is 14, which means she can be considered in court if the situation escalates. If we can reach an agreement during mediation, that would be ideal, but just in case, I have confirmed that she actually wants to stay with me. She has made it clearly plain that she doesn't want anything to do with Kathy, not just now anyhow. She told me that in the future, she would contemplate reuniting with Kathy and restoring their connection, but for the time being, everything is too fresh. She clearly blames her mother for splitting up the family, and I can't say anything because it's technically correct. I don't want to be the type of father who turns his child against his ex-partner for petty reasons, but in this case, I don't think there is much I can do. Kathy has done a fantastic job alienating our daughter, who now prefers to keep her distance from her own mother. They were fairly close before the affair came to light, so this is a significant departure from what they were both used to. Kathy is clearly irritated that my daughter is on my side, as she has always attempted to be closer to her. Speaking of which, several of you wanted to know who informed our daughter about the affair. It was Kathy, not me. She confessed in an email to our daughter a few days after she moved out, without first asking if I wanted to be involved. My kid was really unhappy when she found out, but she still wanted to speak with her mother just once. However, Kathy refused. When I tried to contact Kathy to let her know our daughter wanted to talk, she refused because she was too preoccupied with the divorce process. She also didn't think it was proper to discuss it, so she expressed what she wanted to say in that email and had nothing else to add. I attempted to persuade her to speak with our daughter only once because she appeared to have a lot of questions. However, Kathy remained adamant about her decision. After that, she stopped speaking to us entirely, and my daughter's perception of her mother shifted dramatically. Kathy holding me responsible for that does not seem fair to me. Anyway, I've spoken with my lawyer and we're going to deal with this. Update 2. Kathy ultimately served me with the notice for full custody a few days ago, and my lawyer and I responded by fighting it right away. We are scheduled to meet with the court-appointed mediator tomorrow, but Leon called me today. I was shocked to see his name on my phone because we didn't have much to chat about, but I answered the call. As soon as I did, he asked me to return Kathy to him. He claimed he'd been trying to reach her for a few days and knew she'd been with me or spoken to me, so he wanted me to tell her where she was. I told him I had no idea where she was residing, but I had spoken with her in the last several days and she was here to battle for custody of our kid. To be clear, I did not do this to help Leon, but I hope that if Leon stopped by and chatted with Kathy, he might alter her mind and convince her to return. If I was lucky, he might even get her to sign over her rights to our daughter. With that in mind, I told him everything and added that she was upset since he had not contacted her after she left that night. I urged that if he wanted her back, he should act immediately. The poor guy had no suspicions and had no idea he was being exploited, which worked out perfectly for me. I just hope Kathy still wants to make it work with him. When he comes back, she might accompany him. I also discussed this idea with my lawyer, who confirmed that what I did was correct. Even though the odds are already in our favor, it doesn't hurt to save time and energy by resolving this before going to court. Update 3. Kathy and I met for our first mediation session 2 days ago, and it obviously did not go well. She disagreed with all of our views and said it was all a waste of time before ending the session after half an hour. After she left, I returned home after picking up my kid from school. When we returned, Leon was waiting for us at our door. The poor guy appeared to be in a dreadful state, and I can only imagine how he must be feeling after spending a few months with Kathy. I told him he needed to leave because my daughter and I had just returned home and wanted to rest. We didn't have time to cope with his turmoil, and I had already helped him in whatever way I could. I couldn't go out of my way to aid the man who had been having an affair with my wife, but he actually broke down, claiming that after their last battle, she hadn't even responded to any of his texts, and he had no idea where to seek for her. I informed him, as I had before, that I still didn't know where she lived and that I couldn't help him. He just slumped down on the front steps, crying and holding his head in his hands. At that moment I began to become upset since this guy and Kathy had literally ruined my life, and now he felt comfortable enough to seek my assistance in finding her so they could settle things. I ordered my daughter to go inside so I could deal with this, and after she was inside, I told Leon he needed to leave because I was done with both of them for good. For good measure, I gave him Kathy's parents' contact information and told him to call them if he couldn't reach her, but he had to leave us alone immediately. I told him that he had damaged both mine and Kathy's lives. He tried to apologize, saying he didn't mean to harm me, but he'd fallen in love with her and couldn't stop himself. I didn't want to hear it, so I said nothing, and he departed. I'm constantly exhausted and bewildered, and I have no idea what I'm doing with my life right now. I sincerely hope and pray that Leon and Kathy can make things right for my sake, if not theirs, because if they do, they will most likely leave me and my kid alone, and I will finally be able to move on with my life. At this point, I'm not sure what's going on or how I should feel about anything. I'm numb for the most part and can't wait for this to be over. Update 4. Kathy stopped our mediation sessions a few days ago, saying she wanted to take our case to court. That would not end well for her, as we all knew, but it appears she was no longer in denial. Anyway, she came to see me a few hours ago with Leon. I suppose they were able to patch things up. I didn't invite them in since my daughter was home and unwell, and I didn't want to make things worse for her. I ordered them to wait for me at a nearby cafe, called my mother to take care of my daughter, and then went to the cafe to hash things out. When I arrived, Kathy and Leon apologized for everything they had put me through. Again, I had to inform them that this no longer mattered to me. I really wanted them to move on and explain why they had called me there. I didn't want to waste my time with insincere apologies, so they stopped skirting the issue and informed me that they recognized they had made a mistake by screwing me over and that they were really unhappy in Boston. Kathy missed our daughter, while Leon missed being his own boss. Kathy now wanted me to agree to send our daughter to see her every weekend, or every other weekend, because she didn't want to give up her current life. Leon's demands were even more outrageous. He wanted to return as a partner in the company and open a branch in Boston. The finest part of all was that they expected me to make a decision within a few days. Kathy's bosses had advised her that if she wanted to keep her job, she needed to return because she could no longer work from home. Even if I wanted to tell them I would think about it, I didn't have the option. That's why I ended up telling them I couldn't agree to any of it. Leon had already quit and sold his shares, which I had on paper, so I was not going to hire him again because I didn't trust him at all. Kathy's proposal was unreasonable because our daughter did not deserve to go back and forth every other weekend simply to see her mother. She should have considered these things before moving to Boston. This is absolutely not my fault. They began to dispute with me, saying they were willing to compromise since they did not want to fight this in court. I told them that the thought of fighting for what they wanted in court and actually winning was ridiculous. They only wanted to bargain with me in person because they believed they could manipulate me. Unfortunately, I was not weak or stupid enough to believe any of this. The only reason I'd come to meet them was to put an end to this. That actually silenced them, since they realized they'd never win if this went to court. I told them that the most I could do for them, or Kathy in particular, was to talk to our daughter and get her to meet Kathy whenever she came to visit. Aside from that, I wasn't doing anything, so they could take or leave it. I wasn't going to waste any more of my time arguing with them. Kathy seemed desperate, so she consented quickly, and I left. I will talk to my daughter when she feels better, but I will not compel her to do anything she does not want to do. If she decides she doesn't want to see her mother again, that is her choice. I am not going to convince her. Update 5. Hello, a few months have gone by. In my last update, I stated that I would not push my daughter to meet her mother if she did not wish to. I next spoke with my daughter, telling her what I had said to Kathy. She stated that she wanted some time to consider things over, so I expressed this to Kathy a few months back. Since then, we have not communicated. I'm not sure if she and Leon have settled their differences. I don't care. According to what I know, they are still together and living in Boston. Good for them, I suppose. At least they've left me alone, so I can now start to move on. That's exactly what I'm doing. The best revenge is to live well, therefore I'm focusing on working and growing my kid to be a wonderful human being, unlike her mother. Basically, I hope I am successful in doing so.